Hello, good evening. Um, Today's Thursday again. I'm reading the eighth chapter from Sai Satcharitra. Sorry. Yeah. So the name of the chapter is Importance of Human Birth, Partaking Food Collected by Alms, Baijabai's Devotion, Sleeping with Tatya and Malsapati. My obeisance to Sri Ganesha, to Sri Saraswati, and Sri Guru Maharaj, to the family deity, to Sri Sita Ramchandra. My most humble obeisance, I bow in reverence to the most venerable Guru Sri Sainath. Om Sai Ram. In the last chapter, it has been narrated how no one could say if Sai was a Hindu or a Muslim. How great was the good fortune of Shirdi that Baba made it his home. How initially Baba came as a young lad and later had become a mad fakir to the people. How he made a beautiful garden out of a place which was originally rough and barren. How after a time on the same spot came up a Vada. Also how Baba excelled in bold yogic practices of Dhotipati and Khandana Yoga. Dhotipati is also known as Dhautipati, well, and the protector of the devotees that he was, how Baba wore out his body, taking their sufferings upon himself. How can I describe all these adequately? Now listen further to the great significance of being born a human, to the description of Baba's practice of collecting alms and of Baijabai's selfless service to the saints, as also of Baba's astonishing way of taking meals. How the three of them, that is Tatya, Baba, and Malsapati, used to sleep in the mosque, and how Sai Samartha used to go to the house of Kushal Chand at Ratha. The day dawns and sets in the evening. Years are devoured thus. Half the time passes in slumber, and even the remaining half brings no peace and happiness. Childhood is absorbed in play, spent absorbed in play, the youth in amorous pursuit of the youthful maiden, and the old age in the weariness brought on by debility and disease, and forever plagued by maladies. To come to this world only to fatten the body, to keep on breathing, and live up to a ripe old age, is this the fulfillment of a human birth, of this human birth? Attainment of the Supreme is really the highest achievement of human life. Or else, what is so wanting in the existence of dogs, pigs, and other animals? Dogs also fill their bellies and go on procreating to their heart's content. Then, what is the significance of a human birth when both a dog and a human are in the same position? If the nature of the physical body and copulation alone are the means of fulfillment of the ultimate goal of human existence, then this human birth is meaningless indeed. If the life be spent only in the fourfold activity of eating, drinking, sleep, etc., then what is the difference between dogs and humans? Think of yourself and judge. If this alone is the fulfillment of the human body, then what is the deficiency in the existence of bees and plants? The bellows too, breathe in and out. Even dogs nourish, fatten their bodies. But a human being is emancipated. He is fearless and he is free and he is everlasting. To have this awareness itself is a fulfillment of this birth. From where do I come? Who am I? Why have I a human birth? He who knows the principle of all this is a proficient man. Without this knowledge, everything is futile. Just as the flame of Nanda Deep appears to be the same form in the beginning to the end, but undergoes change from moment to moment, so also is the state of the body. Childhood, youth, and old age, these are states apparent to all people. They come and go most naturally without anyone ever realizing it. The state of the flame that we see this moment ends in the same instant and appears to be the same, though constantly changing. Similarly, what this body is this moment, it will not be the same the next moment. This body is the outlet for excreta, dirt, phlegm, pus, saliva. Such are the ill boding qualities it bears. This body is the habitation of worms and insects. It is a storehouse of various diseases, is mortal and transient. It is a cart loaded with flesh, blood, and muscle, a frame of skin and bone, a stinking pit of excrement and urine, an encumbering appendage of the soul indeed. This body with its skin, flesh, blood, muscle, fat, marrow, bones, air, as one of the humors of the body, and certain loathsome parts like the genitals and the anus is but short lived, but unpropitious, destructible, and transient as this body is, yet it is the only instrument of attaining God, the home of all sanctity. Sorry. Pursued as we are all the time by birth and death, the horror of its very idea dogs our footsteps. And yet, when life departs, it leaves all of a sudden. Who keeps count of how many come and how many go, by day and by night? Some are even born with the longevity of the sage Markandeya, but even they cannot escape death. While in such transient human body, time is spent in listening to the stories of saints by remembering them. Sorry, merit is acquired, is the time well spent. The rest of the time is wasted. When such awareness comes with certainty, it is in itself the advantage of being born a human. But without personal experience, nobody is convinced of the truth of this. Please excuse me. I have a coughing fit once in a while, so. And yet, one has to undertake a deep study even to get this experience. Hence, he who desires lasting happiness should endeavor to attain this glory. Wife, son, prosperity, wealth, in fact, the kingdom of this boundless earth, a man may attain by God's grace, and yet his heart is insatiated. But with lasting happiness and peace as the objective before the mind, when God is worshipped by seeing Him in every living being, it will lead to attainment of salvation or moksha. By putting together the skin, flesh, blood, and bones, this human frame is made up, which is a great obstacle in the spiritual path. Hence, give up all attachment to it. Treat it only as your servant. Do not exalt it unduly. Do not pamper it all the time. Allow it to pave the way to hell, and allow it to pave the way to hell. Give it food and clothing enough for subsistence, as also nurture for the time being, for it may be used for your spiritual upliftment and the final liberation from birth and death. Subject to calamities of birth, death, etc., about to be destroyed any moment, such as this perpetual unhappy human existence, of what use is its momentary happiness? As the lightning which disappears in a flash, or the ripples that momentarily appear in the ocean. Such are the short lived uh, pleasures of the body. Give some thought to this. Knowing full well the body, house, wife, and children, and the people around him are all destructible and have borne the bias of the parent's office on his shoulder to the grave, a man yet does not awaken to the truth. He still continues the same way as those who have already departed before him, thus making the rounds of birth death cycle. But that does not does not stop a moment to think as to the means by which these should be restrained. In attending all the time to the well being and prosperity of the family, life passes away swiftly, but time is diligent in counting the years as they pass and will never forget its duty. And then, when the last moment arrives or comes, he will not pause even for a moment, but will, like a fisherman, pull the net tightly, and then, in that moment of death, the human being will be tossed in helpless agony like a fish caught in the net. It is by a plenitude of great fortune and by accumulating scores of meritorious deeds that this human body is acquired. Hence, make most of this opportunity you have. Even with the gigantic efforts of a Bhagirath, this human body cannot be attained. Only by destiny it comes in our hands quite unexpectedly. Do not throw it away in the dust in vain. One who postpones anything to the next birth is a fool to believe that, though in this birth human body slips out of his hands, he will definitely get it back in the next. So many sinners mingle with the male semen and appear at the entrance of the womb to get a human body, according to their karma. Many, even more vile as a result of the karma, move from the lower order of mobile creatures to be born as immobile beings. In accordance to in accordance with the knowledge attained and the karma performed, one is ordained to get a particular body. This is acknowledged by the Shrutis also. For Shruti, the compassionate mother says, according to one's knowledge, one is born. As is the store of knowledge, so is also the birth that a being gets. Incomprehensible are the ways of God. It's impossible to understand them fully. Blessed is a human being who can attain even a fraction of knowledge about them. By greatest good fortune, one gets human birth, and by great accumulated merit is one born a Brahmin. But God's grace alone brings one to size feet. Rare indeed is the perfect gain to have all three. Varied are the species of created beings, but that of the human being is the highest among them. For it is only possible for the humans to think, who has created us? From where do we come? And like. Other species do not understand anything. They are born one day, they die, without understanding of the past, present, or future, or the existence of the Supreme Being. So God was happy to create the human being, thinking that man will use his discretion and wisdom, will embrace renunciation and detachment, and will worship him. Since there is none other in this creation who is endowed with the means as that of the human body to attain salvation, he thought man will use that body for sadhana and will attain the immortality of Narayan himself. A magician himself is very clever. He never performs his tricks before an audience that is ignorant. He anticipates an audience that will appreciate the secret of his deafness, eh, the skill of a magician, basically. Similarly, after having created innumerable birds, animals, trees, worms, and insects, the Lord of this creation was left with a feeling of great astonishment and regret, thinking that all his achievement was meaningless. Oh, such a boundless expanse of this universe, totality of all worlds, including all galaxies, with the sun, the moon, the countless stars, and yet no one has the least thought or admiration for this marvelous creation achievement of the Creator. Not a creature knows for certain what is my purpose as the Lord of the universe in creating this sport. Until therefore creature is created with so sharp an intellect as to understand and admire the incomparable glory of my work, all this achievement of mine is in vain. So the Almighty created a being in human form. He thought with the power of his discriminating intellect, man will know me. He will be amazed with the knowledge of my inconceivable grandeur, as also my unexcelled powers, and will realize that the entire universe is but a sport of my Maya. Only he will be able to acquire knowledge, reflect, and meditate upon me, and be filled with awe and wonder. And that will bring my sport to completion. The happiness of spectators is in itself the fullness of my sport. Seeing my perfect control over the world, man will feel fulfilled. To perform pleasurable karmas or to earn wealth is not the purpose of nurturing the body. The fulfillment of human life lies in acquiring the supreme knowledge till breath leaves the body. Realization of non duality between Jivatma and Paramatma is this supreme knowledge. It is what the Upanishads call Brahma Jnana, and the worships and service to the Lord is the same. This is what is implied in saying Bhagwan of the devotees. He who has gained this knowledge of non duality, that the Guru and the Brahman are not separable, and worships in this spirit, will find it easy to overcome Maya. Those men of faith who have attained knowledge and renunciation are alone fit to enjoy self absorption. Know what such devotees are truly fortunate. To regard oneself as fulfilled and perfect without having removed the ignorance arising out of an awareness of true self creates a strange impediment. Knowledge and ignorance are both states of mind that give rise to illusions and errors. As a thorn is pulled out by another thorn by removing the one with the other, dispel ignorance by knowledge. However, the highest purpose of human existence is to go beyond knowledge and ignorance and merge in the pure self. Thus, the oil of sensual attachments is burned completely, and the darkness of ignorance is reduced to ashes. The wick of me and mine, that is the ego, is burnt to cinders. Knowledge will not shine forth in all its radiance. Know that all actions pertaining to the human body, whether evitable or inevitable, are performed by a conscious determination or plan. Sorry. If one has to do, if one has no other work to do, one should quietly enjoy comfort and prosperity or take Ram Nam. It will bring freedom from cares and from desires. The bodily organs, mind, and intellect are limitations to which Atman is the subject. Due to these, though himself without a beginning and a non enjoyer, the Atman brings him upon himself the suffering resulting from karma. Thus, though a non enjoyer by nature, the suffering of the Atman is due to his limitations. And for this, Nyaya Shastra has given the proof by making use of Anvyaya Vyatireka. Nyaya Shastra is one of the books. So, yeah. I don't know. I have to read that too. So, know this to be the vital principle and leave the necessary karma for action, as also the various processes of the mind to the intellect. As for yourself, act as a non doer of action. Conduct yourself according to the dictates of your own dharma. Always contemplate on the Atman, which is a self, distinguishing him from the Anatman, which is the non self. This is the ultimate goal of human life, which lies in the contentment that comes from self absorption. There is no other means of obtaining the four objectives of human life, that is, Artha, Dharma, Kama, and Moksha, except the human body. And the man who devotes himself to the study of how this can be done will attain the status of Sri Narayana himself. This is, I think I need to read this over and over again to understand. Yeah. And then go over it to actually feel it. Yeah. I mean, actually do it in my daily life. So, anyway, going reading further. Hence, while this body is not yet fallen, endeavor to know your true self. Do not waste even a moment of this human birth. The salt water of the ocean undergoes a transformation in the clouds to become sweet water. Happiness follows similarly when one is absorbed at the Guru's feet. No one except the Guru knows how this human body can be truly liberated. It is only when the Guru takes them in hand that the dull and ignorant beings are uplifted. Mantra places of pilgrimages, gods, Brahmins, practitioners of astrology, astronomy, Vaidyas, and lastly the seventh one, that is Guru Raj. All these are effective only according to one's faith in them. The same proportion is as the degree of faith is reposed in any of these, will the measure of success be achieved. Saints turn a worldly man into a spiritual seeker, and such a spiritual seeker, and such a seeker into a man emancipated. And to this they become manifest from their unmanifested state, all for the benefit of others. That which cannot be accomplished by lectures of Puranas is easily accomplished by merely observing the behavior of the saints. Their movements, their conduct are wordless instructions. Rare indeed is a man who practices forgiveness, calm, detachment, compassion for all beings, benevolence, restraint, and humility. What cannot be learned by reading a book is easily learned by observing a person in action. The light that the numerous constellation of stars cannot give is given by the sun alone. So it is with these benevolent saints, all these natural actions liberate the living beings from worldly bondage, bringing them great happiness. Sai Maharaj was one of these great saints, with boundless spiritual wealth and grandeur, always self absorbed. His conduct was yet like a fakir. He always looked upon all equally, had no attachment to me and mine, and was compassionate towards all beings, as he saw the Supreme Being in all creatures. Pleasure brought him no elation, sorrow, no grief. The wealthy and pauper were to him the same. How can this wonderful state of mind be commonplace? He who would make a wealthy man of a pauper by merely lifting an eyebrow would, however, go himself from door to door, a jar, joli in hand. Blessed indeed are those at whose door Baba appeared to collect alms and spread out his palms and called out, "Oh, my daughter, bring me a quarter from your bhakri. Give me a quarter of your bhakri, that is the bread which is made of jawar. Jawar is a type of a millet that you get in India. Picking up a tumbler in one hand, in the other hand the jholi, he would himself go from door to door to a few fixed households every day. Vegetables curried or dry, milk, buttermilk, all these food items were poured into that one tumbler by the people. Oh, what an extraordinary way of collecting food. And to receive the cooked rice or bhakri, he would spread out the jholi. But the liquid dishes, whatever they might be, were all poured into that one tumbler. And from where should the relish from each dish arise when the palate knew not the indulgence of enjoying tastes and flavors? How can such a desire arise in the mind at all? Whatever fell into the joli fortuitously he would be content to eat. Whether it was tasty or tasteless, it did not matter, as if the tongue was devoid of all taste. Every day in the morning he would collect alms in the village, and with which he would satisfy his hunger and be content. And the alms were they even collected regularly? No, indeed. Only when he felt so inclined would he go for them. With the result, sometimes he would go to the village for the alms as many as 12 times in a day. The food so collected he then would be put in a wide mouthed earthen jar in the mosque, from which crows and dogs freely partook of the food. The lady who swept the mosque and the courtyard also took home some 10 to 12 bhakris from it. No one prohibited her from doing it. He w- he would even he would not even dream of shooing away the cats and dogs. How will he refuse food to the poor and weak? Blessed, blessed was his life. In the beginning, he became well known to the people as a mad fakir. What greatness could they expect in one who filled his belly by begging for morsels? But the fakir was generous, friendly, and without any expectations. Volatile outwardly, inwardly he was steadfast and tranquil. His ways were beyond all comprehension. But even in that mean, petty village, there were some who were very kind by nature. They considered him to be a sadhu. Tatya Kote's mother, by Jabai, used to carry a basket on her head with bhakris and take them to the forest at noon. Mile after mile, she would wander in the forest in search of the fakir, trampling through over the thick shrubs and bushes, and would trace the smacked fakir, falling at his feet when she found him. How great was her kindness and nobility! Going into the woods and forests, she used to feed Baba a simple meal of dry or curried vegetables and the bhakri in the afternoon. And to the end of his days, Baba also did not forget this devoted service of hers, remembering it full well he saw to her son's welfare. Both Baijabai and her husband truly had a firm faith in the fakir. In fact, the fakir was to them both the Almighty Lord Himself. After all, it is only to the faithful that God really belongs. The fakir used to be in deep meditation. Baijabai would set out a leaf, serve food from the basket on it, and with some effort would feed him. Baba always said, Fakiri is a true kingship, for fakiri is everlasting. But see how transient riches are. Later, Baba abandoned the forest and came to stay in the village. He began to take the food in the mosque, thereby saving mother, that is Baijabai, all the arduous effort. And from then onwards, this regular practice of taking food for Baba was kept up by the couple and after that by Tatya. Blessed, blessed are the saints in whose heart dwells Vasudev, that is God forever. Blessed are those devotees who, by rare good fortune, are enriched in their saintly company. Tatya was very lucky indeed. Malsapati also must have accumulated great past merit, for both enjoy the privilege of Baba's company equally. Tata, Tatya and Malsapati both slept in the mosque itself. The love that Baba had equally for both was thus undescribable. The heads used to be in three directions, east, west, and north, while the feet would touch each other in the center. Thus, spreading out their sheets, they would keep on talking of all manner of things. If one of them appeared to be dozing off, another one would waken him. If Tatya started snoring, Baba would suddenly get up and turning him upside down would press his head down. Taking Malsapati with him, both would claps, cla- clasp, sorry, clasp Tatya closely, squeeze him tight, press his legs, and would rub his back vigorously. In this way, for 14 years, Tatya slept in the mosque with Baba. Oh, how wonderful were those days! They were etched in their memory permanently. Leaving the parents at home, Tatya, out of his fondness for Baba, used to sleep in the mosque. With what measure can the love be measured? Who can assess the value of the grace? Then his father died. The responsibility of the household fell on Tatya. He became the head of the family and himself became a husband. He then started sleeping in his own house. Only when there is such a steadfast faith will there be sighs, marvelous experiences, even without being asked for, and to the devotee it is a miracle. Similarly, there was a very well known gentleman of Rahata called Kushal Chand, who was a wealthy Nagar Shet of the village. I mean, like head of the village, Nagar Shet, like very rich person of the village. Just as the well-known devotee Ganpat Kote Patil was a great favorite with Baba, so was Kushal Chand's uncle very dear to him. Though of the Marwadi community, he had great fondness for Baba. They used to meet frequently, to the great pleasure of both. After some time, as God willed it, the senior Shethji passed away, but Baba did not forget the friendship. In fact, his loving concern for the family redoubled. Later on, Baba's affection for Kushal Chand grew steadily, and so long as he lived, he watched over his welfare day and night. Taking with him his loving companions, Baba would go to Rata, a mile and a half away from Shirdi, sometimes in a bullock cart, sometimes in a tanga. On the village boundary, he would be received by the villagers amid a clash of musical instruments like drums, shehnai, etc. With loving devotion, they would then bow at his feet. Lovingly, Baba would then be taken into the village with ceremony to the delight of everyone. Kushal Chand would then take Baba to his own house, making him comfortable in his seat, would offer him some refreshment. Both would then recall old times which made them very happy. Who can describe their joy? When the joyful meeting, light refreshment of fruits, etc., were over, Baba would return to Shirdi with his companions, filled with rejoicing in the self. Rata village was situated on one side, on the other side was Nimgaon. Between the between these two stood Shirdi. From this central point of Shirdi, although Baba never physically went beyond these two villages during his lifetime, yet he knew everything that happened everywhere, anywhere. To no other place did he ever go, nor had he seen a train, but the arrival and departure, the timetable of trains he knew perfectly. To catch a train in good times, the devotee would make great preparation. But when they went to take his permission, Baba would merely say, "Why have you become so impatient?" And they would say, "But Baba, if I don't make haste now, I will miss my train to Bombay." and my job will be in jeopardy, for my boss will surely sack me. There is no other master here. Go and have a piece of bhakri, have your meal at noon, and then go. And those who had the intrepidity to defy those words, young and old, wise and discerning, they all had experienced their truth. Whoever obeyed his order never missed the train, but he who disobeyed him readily experienced difficulty. Innumerable are such experiences, one after the other, each one a new and unique one, which I shall narrate briefly. Hemad now seeks refuge at Sai's feet. Sorry. Hemad now seeks refuge at Sai's feet. In the next chapter, some narration of how the devotees used to take Baba's permission to return home will be made. How he who had the permission would go and he who did not have would stay back. But he who disobeyed him, sorry, would come to harm will be described in the next chapter. Similarly, Baba's adopting the Madhukari practice and why Baba chose to eat food collected as alms, how he absolved himself from sins such as Panchasuna, etc., will be explained later. Hence, with great insistence, I pray to my listeners from moment to moment that they should listen to the story of Sai for their own benefit. Weal be to all. Here ends the 8th chapter of Sri Sai Samartha Satcharitra called Importance of Human Birth, Partaking of Food by Alms, by Jabai's Devotion, Sleeping with Tatya and Malsapati, as inspired by the saints and the virtuous and composed by this devotee Hemad Pant. So, thank you for listening, and remember each chapter that I read that Hemad Pant has written and translated by Indira Kher to English. Um, each chapter has some lesson or the other with the story of Sai Baba's life, but the beginning of the chapter with his teachings are those the ones which are important, and I think every time you read it gives a new meaning. So that's the reason why I would rather read the whole chapter in all rather than giving like a brief explanation of the chapter. So because I don't want to miss the teachings of Baba, and those are more important. Thank you. Om Sai Ram. Till next time.